Where do you guys stand on slimy drinks?
How slimy are we talking?
Yeah.
We're talking about organic chia vitality beverages.
It's a pass for me.
Vitality?
Yeah.
What kind of vitality?
Omega-3 and prebiotic fiber. I guess it's a raspberry passion vitality. I'll let you use your imagination.
I only like postbiotic fiber.
There's this beverage that I only ever see at Whole Foods that I always grab one when I'm at Whole Foods. Not a sponsor, but I'm going to say the name of the beverage anyway. It's the Mama Chia Seed Your Soul Organic Chia Vitality Beverage. And it's a drink you kind of have to chew because it's full of seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really slimy, but it's so good. I like the texture.
You ever have, what was that called? Orbits? Or was it called Balls? You know the drink? We've talked about this on the show
Balls
before.
is just an energy drink. There's no texture. Orbits, I think, is the one from the 90s with like the huge balls in it.
Right. Non-carbonated, fruit-flavored beverage with like jelly globules inside of it. We've
Can't say I've had that.
Oh.
Yeah. Orbits walked so
Doesn't
that
sound the most appetizing.
boba tea could fly.
And on today's episode of What's in Your Mouth, Stan has... I'm not going to finish that.
Orbits.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to apologize for liking mouth stuff. I remember Orbits vividly. Never got to taste one.
Oh, there was a coffee shop that I used to go to like every Wednesday or Thursday night when I was a senior in high school, and we would listen to a band play like cover songs, and we would drink Orbits, and we would defy gravity, much like Elphaba.
What did it taste like?
Oh, it tastes like flat Sprite with gummy bears in it.
Was all the flavor in the bits, or did the beverage contain flavor too?
The beverage tastes like Sprite.
Yeah. Did the bits have flavor as well?
Yes, they taste like gummy bears.
That's terrible.
As I said.
It's
terrible.
Yeah, I'm still just trying to... I just want more food and beverage sponsors, so I'm going to keep talking about mouth stuff until someone supports our show. Hello and welcome to episode 306 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from undisclosed Massachusetts, it's the one and only Devin O'Donnell, aka Do Mike. Hey, Devin.
Undisclosed is the name of a town? I didn't know this.
You just won't tell me exactly where you live. You're equidistant from every other part of Massachusetts.
I'm in the middle, okay? Just pretend.
That tells you.
Just pretend that I'm in the middle.
Yeah, in the middle, equidistant from all other parts. I'm sure this is a math problem somebody from a renowned Massachusetts enterprise such as MIT or Harvard could solve. What point in Massachusetts is equidistant from all other points in Massachusetts?
I'm sure Karsten, who's certainly listening to the show,
He's a math guy. He knows.
He can do that triangulation in his head.
As long as he doesn't dox me.
We call this Devin's theorem.
Is it?
I just want to do like a Google map walk through your town, see the sights.
There's not much here. Trust me. It's kind of boring.
Speaking of boring, also with us is the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
How very dare you? That's maybe the harshest one in a while, but it's fair. It's okay. I am a 46-year-old dad with a podcast, so what else? I really tear it up at dinner parties.
Yeah, we have fun together.
Yeah. That's what's important.
Maybe we'll have fun this weekend. Can we go out on Saturday night, see a show?
Is that Saturday? I thought it was Sunday. Is it Saturday?
It is Saturday.
Saturday's fine. That's better for me.
Okay, great.
Because I can't go see a rock show on a Sunday night. What are you talking about?
Who can? So, in Chicago, the band that does our outro music, Space Blood, is reuniting for one night only because it's their drummer's birthday. And Dave has never seen a Space Blood show. So I am insisting on taking him.
That's awesome.
He also wants to show me off to his friends. That's what it is.
I may not know very many people there anymore because I'm so removed from the scene. But yeah, it's going to be at Cobra Lounge on Saturday, February 1st.
Drop by.
Yeah, come on by, Devin.
Yeah, sure. I'll just take a flight over there.
Yeah, why not?
Just quick red line.
You got some miles. Just use your miles.
I barely fly.
We should start a dive down credit card and accrue miles.
What if we just started like a dive down travel hacks blog, and that's what this became about again? How to maximize your miles.
Yeah, that's an idea.
That's an idea. Okay, but what are we actually doing on this episode?
Let's talk about it. We weren't actually planning on this because we didn't have good foresight into tournament schedule, but there was a ton of regional championships in Modern this past weekend. So
3 of them.
There was 3 of them, and we're going to check in on the results of all of them to varying degrees of detail, mostly looking at the RC in Prague in Europe, but then we'll touch on Ottawa and Brazil as well. Prague had, I think, 1,400 players. Huge sample compared to Brazil, which I think had under 200.
It's a really interesting contrast. I didn't realize they were that different.
Calgary had a lot, or not Calgary. Ottawa had a lot too, right?
Under
I think
1,000.
Ottawa was like 500.
Yeah,
was like-
I knew it was more than a couple hundred though. Yeah.
I do find it interesting. You know, like all of Europe is contained to a single region, and then Brazil gets its own. But Brazil has a pretty modest tournament scene, I guess. Maybe they don't get the support. I think that's part of it. Is like LATAM doesn't get a ton of support from WotC, so it's harder to have bigger events.
Yes, we wish that they got more support. We love our South American listeners and player stars. So, Willie Adel, I know you're out there listening right now.
Yeah. But it is also week 3 of Unbanned Talk, and we did play some Splinter Twin in advance of this episode. We meant to play Green Sun Zenith decks as well, but there were 2 problems. One, MTGO been a bit laggy.
A little bit.
You notice this?
It's as
That's
chunky
underselling
as
it.
Yeah, it's as chunky as the beverage you were describing during the cold open.
One second, let me take a sip of this chunky drink.
Yeah, it only takes about 3 seconds for you to sip from that drink.
Does it taste like Daybreak Games?
Oh. Yeah, it kind of does. You know, it kind of tastes like EverQuest. These are the potions you drink in EverQuest, probably. Like chunky, seedy, prebiotic fibers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about...
for that reason.
For that reason, we're going to talk about Splinter Twin. We're not going to talk about Green Sun Zenith. MTGO, a little too buggy to play as much as we wanted to for this episode. And also, we're not going to have enough time. We're going to talk about tournaments. We're going to talk about one card.
Yeah. In this era of the dive down, we try to keep it tight.
That's
Even
right.
though we've talked for 10 and a half minutes right now about nonsense. So let's get through housekeeping.
We got a couple new patrons, Alex N. and Jamie. Welcome both to the Dive Down Nation. Thank you for your support. If you, the listener, would like to support our show, check us out at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also support us with some of our sponsors. Heavy Play gets you 10% off your first order at heavyplay.com with promo code TheDiveDown2024. I'd like to change that promo code, but maybe it's nice to just remember the year that Heavy Play sponsored our show.
That's right.
It's not confusing. And Mana Traders get 25% cash back after 3 months of service using the promo code TheDiveDown. All one word. Big tournament this weekend, though. The USRC is in 2 weeks. This is probably going to be one of our biggest sample size indicators leading up to the USRC of metagame, match spread, and innovations. Although I think the metagame is going to be different from what we're about to discuss, from what we've seen in Prague and elsewhere. Perhaps, if we can source some cards quickly enough. But I think it is really interesting insight into what's going well and what's going not. You're giving me if we can source cards to pivot decks, because sometimes getting cards in time is hard.
Oh,
Yes.
I see what you're saying.
Are you talking about you personally?
No, we the listener. We the Magic player.
I think we, the listener, is probably not swayed much by the results in any of these to change decks. So let's hop into it.
Funny enough, I was thinking about that. We'll get into it in a second, but
Well, let's get into it right now. So we have a couple of different things to look at. Are we going to start with the day one meta of the Prague RC, since it was the largest one? It's the one that the data was the most available for. Obviously, day one meta were different in the different events, but for this particular event, day one in Prague, Boros Energy, 25.7% of the field. 25.7% of the field, friends. Followed by, much farther behind, Dimir Oculus at 11.4% of the field, and Grinding Breach at 11.4% of the field. Hey, guess what? I think there were actually 1,000 players in this tournament for what from what we said earlier, because it's 114 players on Dimir Oculus, which is 11.4% of the field.
yeah.
Just saying, it's a little bit of math there. Eldrazi Ramp had 95 or 9.5% of the field. Golgari Yawgmoth was the fifth deck. Huge tier down here, 3.5%, with Orzhov Blink in the same space, Tamishi Belcher. And then why don't we just say it's Amulet Titan and Ruby Storm after that, with both around 3%. So recap, Energy, tier 1, large portion of the metagame, followed by Oculus and Breach in the second position, with a metagame that combined was less than Energy, 11.4 times 2. Then we had a 9% deck, and then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3-ish% decks between Yawgmoth, Blink, Belcher, Titan, and Storm.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the Energy, kind of not surprising. I think all three of us would probably agree that we would have assumed that Energy was going to be the most played deck going in.
Didn't you think it was going to be 15% or 20%, Devin? I didn't think it was going to be 26%-ish.
I would say that was about expected.
26? Okay.
Yeah, but somewhere between like 20 and 25 in that range. What shocks me a lot is how many people decided to play the Oculus. I'm very surprised because historically that has a horrendous matchup against Boros, and if you expected Boros to be the most played deck going in, selecting Oculus may not have been the best choice, and maybe we'll take a look and see how that shakes out in the win rate, but it did. That's exactly how it bore itself out.
Yeah, true. So Oculus larger than you thought. See, it's funny because I thought maybe people were anticipating more combo and a little bit less Boros, essentially. But Stan, what stood out to you about these results? Anything in particular? Well, how do you feel about it as someone who's thinking about Energy? Not results, the meta.
I totally agree that Dimir Oculus is a huge share. And my guess is people there probably thought Dimir is the deck that beats Energy, even if there's going to be... Or, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. People thought Dimir is the deck that beats the decks that beat Energy. Right,
that's
like
fair.
That's the
Right.
cycle.
I think that's fair.
That's the Ouroboros, right? People are trying to beat Breach and Brood Scale and whatever other combo shenanigans we've discovered can deal with Energy. So you bring Dimir to kind of like try to metagame that way. I do too. I share Dave's surprise. 25% is a lot, and based on what we saw from the weekend, I think this number could start to go down. I think this number will start to go down, actually. Because we saw some really promising results from decks that are both emerging, as well as some pretty promising results from decks that have been a little bit underrepresented previously, but from the sample size of this weekend in Prague and elsewhere, showed some really interesting success stories, which we'll get to.
Yeah. I think that should we hop to the conversion rates?
Yeah.
Next to talk a little bit about Prague. So we're zooming in on Prague because there was more data and more examination there. But the metagame percentage change, this is a proxy for conversion rate. So the data that I have is percentage change in day 2 meta share. And I'm sorry, I don't have the person who put this together in front of me right now. My bad. But the decks that had the largest positive change in day 2 meta share, which basically says more than an even share of them converted to day 2, which basically means they did well, right? We can all agree on that.
Sure.
Was Eldrazi Ramp was over 6% higher in day 2 meta share than it was in day 1. Grinding Breach was over 4% higher than it was in day one. Orzhov Blink was over 2% higher than it was in day one. And then Belcher, Zoo, and Energy were all just below 2% higher than they were in day one. The rest of the decks that are here, we could say just about even until you get further down on this list. And then you see the negative outliers. And the negative outliers include Amulet Titan, which was just under 2% worse than day one. Ruby Storm, which was just also under 2% than day one. And Dimir Oculus, 8% worse.
Yeah, I like how
it was in day one.
I like how this graph is just like a bunch of small bricks, and then it's just like, here's Oculus, it got destroyed.
Yeah, and what this implies, and I didn't look at the actual data here, though, is that if it was 11.4 the day one meta share and it was 8% less, it means it went from being 11% of the day one meta share to 3% of the day two meta share, which is a brutal performance from Dimir Oculus. You guys want to talk about Dimir for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so just kind of like on these numbers alone, like trying to, just before we even look at like actual win rates, just I'm wondering if the people, so Stan had brought up a good point earlier where Dimir is supposedly the deck that beats the decks that beat Boros. But if Boros comes more prepared for its bad matchups, like Breach, like Eldrazi, and Boros is beating those decks, well, now you have Boros in the winner's bracket, and even if Dimir can, withstand those other decks, now you're playing against Boros, and it doesn't matter if the Boros deck is tuned to beat these other decks. It's just the matchup is so free for Boros that you just can't overcome that.
Yeah. Can I tell you something else that I think is a little secret in here? And when we were playing Breach last week, we didn't mention it on the show, but I saw some posts where people were saying that the Breach versus Dimir matchup is also easy for Breach.
I could buy that.
Anecdotally, people talking about sideboard plans, basically, I saw somebody mention on Reddit, and I'm sorry, I don't have their name in front of me. If you're out there, let me know. And they basically said, they can't beat the Saga plan and the Breach plan at the same time. So if you can kind of get both going, then you're going to win. And it's actually an easy matchup and nobody thinks it is. And I think that everybody thought this was a rock, paper, scissors metagame, but actually Dimir is not good. Not good. Is just kind of what it comes down to.
Dimir's a pair of scissors versus two giant boulders.
It's possible. It's possible that that's true. And I say that kind of sadly because I like playing that deck. I don't really like playing the Unearth Oculus package. I got to be honest. I actually would much prefer playing straight Murktide kind of vibes. But yeah.
I like that you mentioned Murktide there because Dimir is just the new, is it Murktide?
It is.
Yeah.
100%.
And it literally was born of that deck. And now it kind of just looks like that in results too.
Which is kind of sad.
Because I'm not looking at actual numbers, by the way. I just have a green matrix screen and I can just sort of understand what's happening. And the green matrix characters look a lot similar for Dimir as they do for Izzet Murktide. But you wouldn't get that by looking at your computer screens.
No, I haven't been paying for that service in years. One thing that's also really strange is that the conversion rate for Dimir was extremely bad in Prague, but I think that it was actually really good in Ottawa.
I heard that.
And was passable in the Brazil RC as well. But I got to tell you, I'm going to go with the bigger sample size here. And also just, I feel like a lot of people, when you see them talking, they're like, Dimir is not good. Why are so many people playing it?
There was a very good episode of Grindcast recently with guest Bob and Cheese going all in on winning an invitational with Boros Energy and talking about the Energy versus Dimir matchup.
Okay.
And he shared some really actionable advice, which is if you can just answer all the threats in Dimir, and they have very few of them, there's not a lot they can do. And you can just sort of keep them off Oculus by keeping their graveyard under control, essentially. And then Frog is quite easy to kill, maybe to dodge his bolt or damage-based removal, but Frog versus Discharge is really awkward for the Dimir player because they have to let the Discharge resolve, and then they basically have to pitch, and then you get to decide whether to put energy into the removal, or you could just net the energy.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I think if these other decks can either just like get under Dimir or just kill their 8 creatures, sometimes kill their 4 creatures. You know, sure, they have Dave Harburger of the Seas and and like some other 1s and 2s, but you're not really winning a game, I don't think, off of just like a Murktide and a Harburger, right?
Yeah. No, it's hard to.
And that's kind of exactly what happened with Izzet Murktide, right? Where when Izzet Murktide was popular, people were boarding Leyline of the Void because it turned off Murktide and Channeler. And it's like, after that, like, what else do they have to kill you with?
Yeah.
Like, they can't, you know what I mean? Like, their cards just don't really have any other utility.
That's why I'm thinking they should start playing Ninja of D-Powers.
Mm.
Fallen Shinobi?
Not so sure about that one.
Just like another frog. They need more frogs.
Why don't they just play Kaido?
Now you're talking.
That card's good.
Stan,
Anyways.
do you have any big picture other results that you want to take us through? So the RC itself was won by, if I remember right, I'm looking very quickly at this. It was won by Teamer Breach.
Yes.
Alex Rohan.
Yep, Alex Rohan.
Yes.
Then the rest of the top 8 was Eldrazi Ramp with Fur MTG. Wow, these names are tourist level extreme for an American. So Boris,
I can do this. Yes. So
I believe in you, Dave. I believe in you.
Yeah. So in third place, we did have Bora Serioglu on Boros Energy. Fourth place, Gankalo Branganka on Boros Energy. And fifth place, Lorenzo Pallone on Boros Energy. So those were the energy decks of the top 8.
3 of the 8.
Yes. But that's it. We then have in sixth place Theodore Eliasson on Mono Green Brute Scale. Seventh place was Callum Laird on Teamer Breach, and eighth place was Wouter Nourge on Teamer Breach. So 3 Breach decks, 3 energy decks, 1 Eldrazi Ramp, and 1 Mono Green Brute Scale.
Which is kind of an Eldrazi deck, right? Like the Brood Scale deck is sort of it's got a less sort of an Eldrazi mid-range plan to it.
They got Eldrazi temples.
They have Eldrazi creatures, but very different game plans. I played the Eldrazi deck yesterday, or last week. Like, you're not ramping into Eldrazi in like a beatdown way. You're just trying to set up a combo kill.
Right.
Right, but they do feature the most important card out of every single Eldrazi deck, which is Kozilek's Command. We should highlight that real quick, because that card is really messed up.
I am shocked at how good that card is. I have to be honest.
It just does everything.
It does. It really does.
And I think so. If you talk about as far as like the Breach versus Eldrazi matchup, where like here you would normally expect Eldrazi big mana versus Breach combo deck. You wouldn't normally expect the big mana deck to be to be ahead of the combo deck. That's why you would play combo in the first place. But the fact that Kozilek's Command just does everything. It nukes the graveyard, so it can mess up Breaches and Shifting Woodlands. It kills all of the creatures, Emry, Tameo, all that stuff. It ramps you. It digs you to more other hate pieces. It just, I don't know. I think that card alone fixes that entire matchup.
Card's good.
I think it basically fixes that entire deck.
It does.
For what
it's Cryptic Command. That's the funny thing. It's just like a Cryptic Command. Like, you can dump more mana in to be better.
Yeah, and occasionally you can just scry 60 and draw a card, which is hilarious.
Is that a lot of scries?
It's a lot of scrying. Takes a while to work through it. Can't do it in this moto.
No, not even close.
I thought they like patched the lag. They gave us like an all access patch.
Mm-hmm. And it was good for like a couple of days.
And then it broke again. Bad. What's going on?
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the Eldrazi deck because I mentioned earlier that I was thinking about switching decks, and this is the one that I was thinking about.
That's where you're going now?
That's where I'm heading. Or that's where I'm thinking about it.
Fascinating.
Mostly because, believe it or not, this deck's actually kind of cheap. Comparative to every other modern deck, it's like less than, it's like $350 for everything.
Because of it doesn't have Mox Opals in it like Breach does.
And Emrakul got reprinted, so that went down a little bit. But yeah, I like this deck a lot. The fact that it has a good matchup against Boros and Breach, which are 2 of the best decks, I don't even think it's that bad against Blue-Black either. Like, this deck it feels like it doesn't have a ton of bad matchups.
No bad matchups. Should we talk about matchups?
Let's
talk about some
We've
matchups.
looked at a matchup matrix. Look, we're not going to get deeply into the Brazil or the Ottawa RC, or I keep saying it's Ottawa. Oh, it's Ottawa.
It wasn't
For
Ottawa.
some reason, I thought it was Calgary. Now I keep saying it's Ottawa. I'm very sorry, people of Canada. This was in Ottawa.
Yeah.
But we have aggregate data for like a long stretch of recent time.
So I have the best decks based on just the matrix at Prague and weighted to sample size, because there's like a handful of decks that look like they have a 75% win rate, but they played like 6 matches.
Right.
One of the best decks was Teamer Breach. Between 814 matches, it won 55% of them. So, just enough more than half. And largely because it was able to beat up on Boros and Demir. And its worst matchups were Eldrazi and Blink. And from what we talked about the day one metagame, like Eldrazi and Blink, a pretty small chunk of the day one metagame. So they were able to kind of like dodge the worst matchups while probably eating lunch through the first 8 rounds.
I mean, last week we all said, wow, Breach seems like it's pretty good. Is it going to show up more? I don't know if 11.5% is more than it was showing up, but this win rate is definitely a standout.
The other standout win rate, and this is a big sample size drop off, across 154 matches was Domain Aggro. Another 55%er, also beating up on Boros and Demir, as well as being a bit favored against Eldrazi. So it loses really hard to Teamer Breach and Orzhov Blink.
Okay. Breach and Blink.
Yeah. The Domain aggro numbers are pretty surprising to me because I always thought Energy was actually quite good against Domain, but maybe that was just in the One Ring days, and losing the One Ring and losing Raptor kind of lost you the card advantage and the velocity you needed to get under like big creatures and leyline binding.
Yeah, I mean, that matchup has always come down to whether or not the Domain player just opens on leyline Scion.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, then Domain's a pretty big favorite. But otherwise, I think Boros is still fine.
I also think the Boros decks are shaving on Blood Moons. So you're losing some of that game one cheese.
Yeah.
And it's harder to race out that game one Blood Moon as well, again, because you're no longer playing the Raptor. So like you kind of either have to connect with the Ragavan, which you only have 2, maybe 3 of. Otherwise, you're playing Blood Moon on 3, and by that point, it might actually be a bit too late.
Are you shaving Blood Moons for Stony Silence? Is that what's going on? Like to find space for that kind of stuff? Or
no, the Blood Moons.
Well, the main deck moons.
Yeah, the main deck moons. You're shaving those for like Fables and Showdown of the Scalds.
Yep.
Card advantage instead. I see.
Yeah.
Too many mirrors. Like you can't be playing Blood Moons at that many Blood Moons main deck if you're going to run into a bunch of Boros mirrors.
That's
true, because when you draw it, it's just going to be dead.
Yeah. You can trick yourself into casting it in the mirror if like you can shut them off of a Flage escape, but everything has to go right. And then the next deck that had a decent sample size, God, not even 33 matches, but it was Eldrazi Blood Chief combo, 55%, beating up.
Do you mean Brood
Scale
Scale combo, or do you mean Blood Chief combo? What's Blood Chief combo?
Well, Blade of the Blood Chief is the other combo piece.
Blade of the Blood Chief.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other card.
Same
okay,
deck.
yeah. Brood Scale.
Only 33 matches though. This is maybe a bit of a surprise to me. I thought this deck was going to be more represented. I was a little surprised to see it was that low.
Actually, it's 63, but still pretty low.
It's still kind of small.
Still low.
Yeah, but 59% win rate. Like small sample size, good numbers, beating up on Boros, Belcher, and Blink, losing hard to Demir and Breach.
Mm-hmm.
Womp womp. A couple low sample size standouts. Mono Black Necro. Remember that, friend?
Sure.
Actually won a challenge this weekend.
Yeah. 33
Did it
matches
really?
there.
It did.
That was the one that had 33 matches, 55% win rate, beating up on Boros Energy, and that's sort of it.
One good matchup.
But maybe that's all it takes when your like best matchup is 25% of the field. And then the last one that I want to call out is Samwise combo. So this is like a food combo.
Right.
Only 28 matches, 61% win rate. And it, in some cases, very small samples of like 1 to 4 matches, but it was beating up on everything like Boros, Eldrazi, Breach, Dimir, Belcher. It just didn't play against Blink, or it lost one match to Blink. So samples are slow, but like maybe Samwise is actually the hero we need.
Samwise,
like he was in the books, just like in the Lord of the Rings. Samwise Gamgee is going to save us again.
So with 28 matches, I'm guessing only 2 people played it then, because I think it was 14 rounds of Swiss.
Sure,
maybe it's 3.
That sounds about
if
right.
They didn't all go to the distance.
Yeah, it's one of the, but very, very small number of players.
Right.
Either way. But yeah, I mean, that sort of checks out, where it's like, creature combo deck that has a bunch of flexibility and toolbox, ways to find all these cards that are good against Breach. Like, I think those decks sometimes can even main deck the creature Stony Sounds that the name is escaping me, that you guys remember.
The Oaf.
Surely.
Right?
The Oof.
Collector
Oof. Collector Oof. That's what it is. So stuff like that. Gaddock Teague and all that.
Yeah.
When you said that, I just imagined Stephen A. Smith saying Gaddock Teague and whatnot.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. I think I like this one. It's kind of a dark.
Well, he's
portal.
gonna tell you to pack and pick one Soul Ring.
Exactly.
So I don't know about that.
Oops.
If we want to take a very quick peek at like the most popular decks, Boros Energy, kind of a coin flip this weekend. 51% across 1,700 matches.
1,700. Wow. Yeah,
That's a lot.
Obviously losing to Breach, like cleaning up the Dimir players, but it was unfavored to Eldrazi. Pretty close though, only 49% against Eldrazi. Losing pretty hard to Mono Blue Belcher. Beating up on Orzhov Blink, which that's the surprise for me. I thought Orzhov was good against Boros. I thought that's one of the reasons you were playing Orzhov, but I guess not.
So many episodes ago, Devin made an assertion that Boros Energy was the new Jund. These are sort of Jundy numbers, are they not?
Oh my god.
Hovering around 50%. Da-da-da-da-da.
No, these are
the
deck has been hit by 4 ban numbers was taken down to earth.
The only thing that is not Jund about this is the play rate, right? Even at its peak, Jund with Deathrite Shaman was probably around this range, I would guess.
Yeah.
So it's just old school Jund. Deathrite, Bloodbraid.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jund,
this is where we're
there was somebody trying to relive the glory days this weekend.
Loved it. Good for you, Par, who went 11-2 or something on Jund Saga.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We mentioned Dimir Oculus had a really bad conversion rate. That's because it only had a 45% win rate in its 700 matches. Losing to Boros, losing to Temur, beating up an Eldrazi, but then losing again to Orzhov. Even losing to Golgari Yawgmoth. Kind of embarrassing.
It is.
Those are Murktide numbers, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's good against Eldrazi. It's good against Belcher, but those decks aren't popular enough, and I think Dimir is going to have a hard time in big Boros rooms. And then Blink. I want to mention Blink. 54% win rate, 250 matches, losing to Energy, but like doing quite well against Temur and Dimir, not doing well against Eldrazi, but then beating up again on Belcher and even Titan.
Real quick, what were the numbers for Eldrazi? I don't know if we went over those.
Eldrazi was a 54% deck with just about 700 matches. Its best matchup seemed to be Temur and Orzhov and Yawgmoth. It's pretty bad against Dimir, and then kind of like a coin flip between Boros and Belcher.
Sounds about right. Is it surprising to you guys that, like, maybe this is just me and I'm like remembering all of the broken formats that we've had to deal with for the past couple of formats, like Nadu and Scam and whatever. But like, is 55 a high win rate? Because I don't know. Maybe it's just I've been accustomed to these 60+% win rate decks over the past, year or so that I'm just so used to that, because it doesn't feel like 55 should be that high, but I mean, it is still more than half of your matches.
It's not enough to be concerning in my mind.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean? Like, I think 55 is enough that if you're a good player and you get lucky, you top 8 with the deck. Like that's what it is, right?
I think more so I was saying is like, if you see a number that's like, okay, this deck had a 55% win rate over the course of the weekend, is that something like, does that number entice you to pick it up more? You know what I mean? More than you would have. Like, does that, if that is the number, like say another deck is closer to 50 or slightly less than 50, are you like jumping ship for a 55? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't believe I can fix it. I would rather take a better deck, especially if it's something with a better sample size, with a large sample size. Like if you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I have Breach that I could play and it's 800 matches and it's 55%. And I'm thinking about playing, Energy, maybe even. It's got a gazillion matches and it's at 50%. I might pass and switch, but that's just me. There's more to it than that too, of course, but.
Right. Yeah.
But I think 55 is significant enough. I mean, even I think the heyday of Energy with Ring and Nadu and stuff, they're still at most like low 60s, high 50s, and that's a truly broken deck that gets a ban.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's just like, that's the thing, because I feel like we've been so accustomed to these 60s over the past, year and a half that I see 55 and I'm like, oh, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So healthy spot,
Hopefully. All right, let's close this RC talk out.
I think if you want to try to metagame, you should probably look at Domain Aggro. Domain Aggro and Temur Breach seem to be like the decks that like have very good matchups against the top of the board.
Yeah, I would take another look at that. The highest finishing one that I think we have in these tournaments is, I'm looking at the Brazil one, and a William Bosanelli Arejo came in 10th place on Domain Zoo. And I think that that's a place to go look. I mean, interestingly enough, these domain lists now, just so everybody understands, this list has Orcish Bowmaster and Flage. In addition to, it's not that many domain threats. It's mostly the removal and Scion of Draco that's doing the domaining at this point. It's not like we're playing, I don't remember what's the 2-drop Neshoba Brawler. Like that's just not happening in this format.
Still Kavus.
We're playing Kavu.
Kavu's still good.
Yeah. But this is Ragavan, Kavu, Scion, Flage, and Orcish Bowmasters, which all cards I think are cool. So,
well, Stan, you said the word domain. And before we exit this particular segment about talking about RCs, I would like to maybe direct your attention to 5th place in the Ottawa Regional Championship.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to derail your testing by that much, but
I literally don't even have to switch tabs, Devin. I was looking at the deck as you.
I know you were.
Can I just
throw in
see
really
it in the
reflection of my pupil?
Before we do this, I'm just going to throw in really quickly that Leo Chappelle came in 9th with a deck list labeled Domain Zoo in Prague, and this is a different list that has Psychic Frog in it as well. Hey, Psychic Frog is great. Maybe we'd only have to play it in Demir, but that's it. I just didn't want to slight Leo. So let's go back to your Rhinos.
I mean, yeah, we got a Rhino deck in the top 8. Richard Haran, very clean looking list.
Yeah, super stock.
Leyline Binding, Sign of Draco. Don't give me hope, Devin, please.
I want to see what their matchups were, okay? Well, when I click on Tournament Path, it says no results found, so yeah, I guess we can't do that.
It's really weird. Their match record is 0-0-0, so maybe they just got buys all the way up into the top 8.
Oh, so sometimes for some reason there's an MTG Melee thing where it just kind of like puts somebody in the tournament. Yeah, they may not have actually top 8. Never mind.
You know what? Even though Domain Rhinos didn't make top 8 in Ottawa by the looks of it, I think it's also worth noting that friend of the show, Dom Harvey, finished in 8th place on Amulet Titan. Edgar Magalhaes, I'm not sure how to pronounce Edgar's last name.
Magalhaes, I think.
Magalhaes also made top 8 on 4-Color Breach. Maybe some of these other people also have no names, but Simon Pichet won Ottawa with Boros Energy, playing 2 Ranger Captain of Eos instead of the Fable of the Mirror Breaker or the Blood Moon slot. So maybe a Ranger Captain is what I should try this week too.
Yeah, too bad I sold all of mine because they were still worth like $30 somehow.
Oh no, where am I going to get some now? Too. Oh God,
I have one. Stan.
Oh no, I need more.
Sorry,
I don't know if I'm actually going to play. What I have been playing, this is the last thing I'll say, is I've been playing the Bob and Cheese list after that Grindcast episode with 4 Conduit Goblin main.
Oh yeah.
because he insisted that this is how you beat on Team or Breach. And I took it to a local Modern Weekly at Good Game Chicago. I went 3-1 at the event, but I mostly just played against Dimir Oculus. Like, I literally played against Dimir 3 times.
Everybody's got Dimir.
And you know what? Conduit Goblin ate a lot of spell snares.
Chomp.
Yeah. And it's good.
I'm surprised they even respected it.
They really did. You know why I think it was maybe scary at times for people is because it comes down and makes 2 energy, and your static prisons are doing a ton of work in the Dimir match. So just like
that's fair.
Being able to constantly churn out energy to like keep their frogs and oculi under control is nice. But you don't like the Conduit Goblin, though?
No.
Devin gave a huge thumbs down during that whole discussion.
Massive.
His thumb got longer.
And bigger.
Because it was zooming into the camera.
He was doing some Gandalf Frodo stuff, forced perspective. It's the biggest thumb I've ever seen.
Speaking of thumbs down, should we talk about Splinter Twin?
Oh, dang, Devin.
Oh, boy.
All right. So, okay, before we get out of the tournament, this episode's going to go a little long this week because we got some stuff to cover here still.
Just a little.
Just a little. So
just a little bit.
And really, we're only apologizing to Shane. The listeners love it.
Yes. They don't know that we've decided.
Wait, why would we apologize to Shane?
We don't
because
have to.
He does the work for free. So,
are you going to change paths, Stan? Are you still energy?
No, I'm just trying to lock in my 75. That's the thing I'm so stressed out about. I talked about it in therapy. Like,
what's your therapist think about this?
Like, he didn't have any good advice.
How do they engage on that?
About me talking about my magic anxiety for 5 minutes? You know, just with curiosity and intrigue.
And empathy, I hope.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not like I'm not going to a magic therapist. He asked me like, oh, hi, by the way, how's your tournament practice going? And I was like, I'm really stressed out about the last 15 cards of my deck. And then I had to explain, you have your core, doesn't change. Then you got your flex slots that you're trying to metagame with. And he just nodded and smiled. I asked, is it like chess or is it like poker? And I'm like, well, it's actually a bit of both. You would love my therapy sessions. I should record one day for the pod.
Let's just release it. Ask him if he'll do it. Devin, now you had some separate thoughts. What are you?
Oh, well,
You were energy, and then you're like, maybe I'm going to play Breach, and now you're like, maybe I'm going to play Eldrazi.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. I don't know what the hell I'm playing. You got to give me when's Charlotte's the first week of March. Give me the last week of February, then I'll tell you what I'm playing.
you have a month still, so
yeah.
I will not know my final deck list until like 6 hours before deck submission.
Right, but if I made you pick today, if you were suddenly going to Portland instead, would you?
Well, if I was going to Portland, I would still have 2 weeks. But if the RC was tomorrow, I would play Boros.
Okay.
And are you playing Fable or Showdown or Blood Moon or anything?
I actually think I'm playing neither. I really like the Jeskai version that I forgot who it was, but somebody taught me to the challenge. I think it was Jacob Pablo, and he had Expressive main deck with Ranger Captain for Mockingbird and then Consign in the board. Because I think Consign fixes the Eldrazi matchup.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Not that anybody cares, but if I was doing the RC tomorrow, I would play Breach. Even though I don't have any of the cards, I would find somebody.
Yeah.
All right. So that was a great wrap up and went longer than we thought on these RCs. But let's talk about somebody who was basically notably absent.
Mm-hmm.
And as Devin said, a huge thumbs down. It's time for us to talk about the third of our unbanned cards in our series, questioning what's going on in this new unbanned reality of Modern.
Episode 1 was Why Isn't Faithless Looting the best card in Modern? Episode 2, although not the actual title of the final file, but Dave, I like how you described it on the episode as what we talk about when we talk about Mox Opal.
Mm-hmm.
This one for me is, why did all the twin sickos suddenly go quiet?
Yeah. Why? I wonder why.
Could be any reason, honestly.
You know, the day is finally here. Some people thought this day would never come. Some people said it would come and not matter. And one of these people were right. I'll let you figure out who. Because long lamented Splinter Twin has finally been freed from the Modern ban list. and it's time for us to talk about it. It did just win a challenge on 124.
Indeed. And that was the deck I played.
That was also the deck that I played, the same exact list. And I'll be curious to see what happens. So, despite all the Reddit posts, the meme decks, the speculation, more, Splinter Twin hasn't made much of an impression in Modern except for this one challenge. And some earlier ones as well.
And some 5-0, some cheeky trophies here and there.
Yeah. But let's talk about what did leave an impression. A little bit of history as usual. I'm going to keep this very brief. I talked about the history of Mox Opal for like 15 minutes last week by accident. I don't want to do that for Splinter Twin again, especially since we just talked about this. But I found a great Reddit thread from about 8 years ago called "The History of Splinter Twin. Was It Always a Combo Win?" posted by a now since deleted Redditor, RIP to a friend. Splinter Twin was printed in Rise of Eldrazi. April 23rd, 2010 is when it came out. I remember people talking about it immediately when I was playing Limited at that time. I didn't pay huge attention to Standard, but I remember that it was kind of something people were interested. And then actually, weirdly, in Standard, it became playable later on. But here's some excerpts of the spoiler thread from MTG Salvation. Number one, people wanted to use Extractor Demon to mill their opponents out. Devin, do you remember Extractor Demon?
I do. I played a lot of that card.
Yes, Extractor Demon. They thought we could make lots of copies on it to bail people out. And then another card came up that's super important, and that card is Fate Stitcher. So Splinter Twin Fate Stitcher, because it has an untapped symbol on it. People thought we could do infinite combos with that as well. But really, two classic lines. The first one was someone who just left a comment from 15 years ago that said, edit, read Splinter Twin wrong. We'll be back later. And then another person just said, Pestermite says hello. And really, turns out Pestermite is the key to this whole thing. What happened from there, though, is that Deceiver Exarch was spoiled in the New Phyrexia Godbook scandal. I don't know if you remember all of that particular kerfluffle where all of New Phyrexia was leaked. People got banned or suspended for a number of years as a result of that. But there was a top 8 list from Standard Grand Prix Pittsburgh 2011 with Splinter Twin combo in it, piloted by Matt Nass. Nobody other than Matt Nass. He came in top 8. And
I remember this deck.
This deck had Deceiver Exarch, Grim Lavamancer, a whole bunch of counter spells, Ponder, Preordain. Ponder and Preordain legal in Standard in 2011.
Along with Gitaxian Probe, which he only had 2 copies of.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need all 4 Git probes and some other stuff. But so there was essentially the shell of Splinter Twin in Standard in 2011. We mostly care about Modern. Twin was also there from the very beginning of Modern. We talked about Pro Tour Philly a number of times. Spoiler, Pro Tour Philly in 2011 was won by Samuel Estradi on Splinter Twin. It wasn't won by the broken Infect decks. It wasn't won by Cloud Post, 12 Posts or whatever that everybody complained about. It wasn't won by Broken Titan. It was won by Splinter Twin in 2011.
Yeah, now, to be fair, that Splinter Twin deck did kind of have all of the fixins, right? It had Ponder, Preordain, Gitaxian Probe. I think Misstep was pre-banned. But it had all of that stuff. So all the good cantrips, the good, probes and all that stuff. So a bit of a different time too.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But it's fascinating to see that all of those decks, I mean, it did get hit hard in the post Pro Tour ban because Ponder and Preordain were both banned in that announcement as well. So it was only there for a moment. It was filled with a lot of air to find the cards that you needed and really made it happen. Some things changed, some things never changed. By the way, I was looking through a MTG Salvation thread about Pro Tour Philly in 2011 where people were live watching along and posting about it on the stream. And the notable things are people complained about the lack of proper Pro Tour coverage, even all the way back in 2011. They complained about how if there aren't massive bannings or a Force of Will print into Modern, the format will never take off. Similar stuff we still talk about today, right? Or guess what? We kind of have Force of Will now.
Those people were from the future.
They were from the future. Over the years, Twin became more prevalent, as we know, and more popular. And then there was a moment that culminated in bannings. And here's what it was. It was January 18th, 2016, which I've talked about before, the day after my birthday, 2016. They banned my deck. And here's the excerpt where they talk about it. Antonio Del Moral Leon won Pro Tour Fate Reforged playing Splinter Twin, and Jelger Vigasma finished third. Splinter Twin has won 2 of the 4 modern Pro Tours. Splinter Twin reached the top 8 of the last 6 modern Grand Prix. The last modern Grand Prix in Pittsburgh had 3 Splinter Twin decks in the top 8, including Alex Bianchi's winning deck. That particular list was Jeskai Twin, and there were 2 other red-blue ones, ones in the top 8. There were 6 twin decks in the top 32 of that particular tournament. And there we go. It's banned as a result.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to get into this a little bit more, spoiler alert, but I mean, like I said, and I said this before, I'll say it again, the format, it's just a different time back then.
Yeah.
I mean, the power level, if you compare, like, go back and look at, I would implore the listeners at home to go and just take a quick look at, decks that were doing well in January of 2016 and compare those deck lists to decks that are doing well in, 2025. It's night and day. It looks like a different format.
What do you have another example handy of another deck that was doing well at that time? I'm trying to remember what else. So it was Tarmo Twin.
It was Amulet.
Blue Twin.
Affinity, I think.
Affinity.
I think that was Affinity's heyday.
Yeah.
Or it was like right around when Affinity started.
Yep.
To start.
I don't know about started, but definitely it was heyday.
Pick up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Was that Malyrapod? I think Malyrapod was one of the better decks around then too.
It had eaten a ban so Pod was banned not too far before this. Pod was banned at the same time that Treasure Cruise was, I think, if I remember right, which is earlier in 2015, I think. You checking. Devin's checking.
It's like a humans deck, modern metagame breakdown, December 2016. So Shrine of Burning Reach? What? Okay. Infect Jund, Burn, Dredge, Affinity, Bant Eldrazi. Who remembers that deck?
Yep.
Tron. So those were kind of like, that was after Twin had already eaten the ban. Yes.
Yep. All right. So that's where we're at. We banned it. And then in the unbanning, we saw what they said. They said, enjoy the memes. People have been asking about Splinter Twin forever. Is it good enough to be unbanned? Is it powerful enough to even stand up in this format? Let me give you guys a little bit of a spoiler with stats. Okay, here's a fact for you. I took a look on MTG Goldfish, like I have for all of these, and did a search for every deck that showed up in a tournament, which counts leagues. It's not just user decks. It's leagues, tournaments, paper tournaments, challenges, all that kind of stuff on MTG Goldfish. There are 80 entries for decks in challenges, leagues, or major paper results for Splinter Twin since the unban. There's only 80 decks that showed up with that. Do you want to know how many decks there are for Faithless Looting? 682.
I was going to guess 400.
You want to know how many there are for Mox Opal?
At least twice that.
1,005.
Yep. I said over 1,000. I was close.
Yeah. So there are 12 times as many results for decks getting 5-0s in leagues, placing in challenges, or doing well in paper tournaments for Mox Opal than there are for Splinter Twin. Tough to refute that.
And basically from that, we can just infer it's because Splinter Twin is worse. People are trying, they're just not succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably also a lot less people trying it because they probably rightfully assume that, it's just going to be bad. It's just like I was telling Dave earlier, it's just a different time. Like the power level of the cards that people are playing are so much higher than they were back then. You don't really the speed of the format is a lot faster. The free interaction is all good against Twin. Solitude has been seeing an uptick recently in that the Orsov Blink deck. There's more Force of Negations. There's Force of Vigors. So you didn't have to contend with that stuff, 10 years ago when people were playing Twin. There's just a lot of factors, and it just really has not aged well.
How does a deck like that win a challenge? And I'm asking purely in a vacuum, not Splinter Twin specifically, but how does a bad deck win a challenge? And I'm asking someone who's won challenges before and has top-8'd countless of them. Good pilot, that's it?
Good pilot on a good day.
You got to get lucky.
Right? Yeah.
Everybody has to get lucky to win a tournament, even the best in the world,
Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing about Twin, and even in this particular age, is we talked a lot about how easy it was to win on turn 3 with Breach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at this list. I did win games on turn 4. Like I had the quote unquote twin god draw when I was leaguing with this, trying to league with this deck with Magic Online being as laggy as it is. I'm looking at this. There's no way for this deck to win on turn 3.
No.
You can only win on turn 4 with this deck. And so by that fact, you are actually playing to win on like turn 8.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like you are trying to trade card advantage. You're trying to get Tarmogoyf out there to distract them. Maybe you beat them down with a Tarmogoyf. And then if they kill all that stuff, then you're like, okay, Deceiver Exarch, tap down your mana, and then play my Splinter Twin and see what happens. But even then, someone might Solitude you. Or, my goodness, they might... This didn't happen to me this time, but like a week ago, somebody played the Black Force against me.
Oh, boy.
That like got rid of all the creatures that had entered this turn, and that was when I was playing... It was when I was playing a different deck a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe people are trying that out. So there are cards that stop all of this from happening. I don't know. It was it was fun to play this list, this Teamer Splinter Twin list by Richie727, who I believe won that challenge. But God love him, I'm not sure exactly how they did.
Well, it's funny too, because I want to go back to something that Dave said earlier when we were talking about the MTG Salvation or the Reddit quotes, where or it was like right after the PT, and everybody was like, "Oh man, they're going to have to make some sort of wave of bannings, or they're going to have to print Force of Will into Modern."
Yeah.
Well, they printed 5 different Force of Wills that all work against the Splinter Twin combo, and I think that is the single biggest reason. There's just too many answers to it, and you have, I mean, look at the metagame, right? You have Boros Energy. You don't really have a lot of time to like set up the twin combo against them because they don't give you, like, they're pressuring you as early as turn 1 every single turn.
Yeah.
They have Galvanic Discharge, which is, it used to be the best removal spell in Modern was Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt couldn't kill Deceiver Exarch. Now everybody's playing with Fatal Push and Galvanic Discharge. Like, there's no more of that Lightning Bolt versus 1/4 aspect. You have combo decks. Breach is killing you faster. They don't really care what you're doing most of the time. Eldrazi can just... Maybe that's like, of the big 3, that might be the best matchup for Twin, where usually Twin is good against big mana, but even then, they have Kozilek's Command to kill your thing at instant speed. So it's like...
thing that killed me is that I thought it was going to be a good matchup too, but Kozilek's Command just gets in there.
Yeah. So it just, does it have any good matchups? I don't know.
I don't think there's any data that indicates it does have good matchups. And from the 4 matches that I managed to get through before I was like, I need to actually work on show notes for this before I spend another 15 minutes tapping and untapping a Deceiver Exarch, it didn't feel like there was anything that was a good matchup in the offing. Maybe like Breach. But Breach is so fast. I played against...
It got to be too fast.
It's too fast. I'm trying to remember what I played against. I played against some like uninteractive deck that actually was like, okay, I can just do whatever. Oh, I played against Hardened Scales. That was the win that I got, was against Hardened Scales.
Fair.
And it was like a fun match that got dragged out to like turn 7. I got to melt down them, all of that kind of stuff. And it still took some work for me to win through them just continuing to play threats. It's just too easy to kill a creature now.
It is.
When I was in New York a couple weeks ago and I went to play Modern, I lost to Splinter Twin.
Did you really?
Boros Energy. And part of that is like I couldn't find my removal spells in time, and I wasn't mulliganing aggressively to them. I mulliganed to like a creature heavy hand, and they played all of their removal spells, and then I kind of didn't have threats. My interaction didn't line up just right, and they had counter spells, and they just played like counter burn and then pressed the I win button.
Yeah. Were they playing the one with the otter and stuff like that? Thundertrap Trainer?
They were playing the otter version.
So after playing Tarmo Twin, I do think it's nice to have another plan to like be able to swing it with Tarmogoyfs and like maybe tempo people out. I think the otter is probably the way to go with this, because you really need to be able to play Flare of Denial as like a backup to the turn that you go for it. If you can be like, I have Thundertrap Trainer online, I Deceiver Exarch you. Then on the subsequent turn, I play Splinter Twin. I have something to sacrifice to Flare of Denial just in case I need it. I think that's the most reasonable plan to do here. The Tarmo Twin is like, well, I'm just gonna like beat you down with this guy and hope that you don't block, which works sometimes, but it doesn't work that great.
I agree with everything you're saying. I'm not going to try and defend Twin as a viable deck, but this Temur Tarmo Twin deck we played, I couldn't bring myself to fire up a league just because Moto was like being so uncooperative and I didn't have the time. But I played about a league's worth of tournament practice and like it didn't feel awful. Like I had less fun playing Hammer than I did playing Twin. Right. And it's like playing Goyfs and making them deal with like a couple of 4/5s and then like having like, oh, by the way, I can flash in a Bounding Crisis and then twin it like, and people, it's tournament practice, so they respect to just concede on the spot. Like it didn't feel like I was playing a bad brew. It just felt like I was playing a tier 3 deck in a tier 1 world. And I think it's more to do with the environment than the cards themselves. And like I think that's kind of like a weird distinction, but it's not hard for me to imagine a scenario where like having the turn 4 I win button in the right shell could be good because sometimes like they're hellbent or you have free interaction and then you can just do the thing. So having not played the Otter version, I can't speak to the difference between that and Goyf. But I loved casting Goyfs and then like putting a ton of pressure because like a big Goyf was a big problem for the decks I was playing with. And then you would have some additional interaction. You'd draw some cards with Flame of Anor, Expressive Iteration, and then you can sort of just like push their back up against the wall and you can either just combo off or beat down the old fashioned way. And one way or the other, like that worked in a few of my matches.
Yeah, but you're not believing this deck. After playing it, you're like, you're not like saying,
I'm heaving it.
You're heaving it.
I'm
Thank you.
I'm not believing it. So here's my super hot take. I'm not sure it's that much worse than Dimir Oculus.
I mean, that's not saying much.
Oof.
But you know what I mean? Like if we're seeing Dimir Oculus put up like very poor results in most tournaments with maybe just like a handful of outliers here and there, like at least this can just like win on the spot sometimes while also playing removal spells and counter magic. And like instead of playing like Oculus itself, like you get Goyf. I guess they both sort of suffer to graveyard hate, but
I mean, here's the thing.
No one's playing Rest in Peace, so like the Goyf can still be big even if they lay Land of the Void you.
Dimir players try not playing Unearth. Okay.
Like challenge impossible.
Try some other stuff. Try some cards that actually do things.
Or if you're going to
like
play
a bunch of
Murktides.
Murktides.
If you're going to play on Earth, what you really need is a Lightning Skelemental in that bad boy.
Yeah.
Hello.
Have you tried that deck with looting yet?
No, I'm practicing for my first RC Devon and trying to sneak in like weird testing along the way.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I'm just trying to find the last 15 cards for Voros Energy.
I'm going to make a list and send it to you, and you're going to get derailed.
Oh, God.
And that's fine.
Don't do this to me.
Yeah, do it on after the Thursday when I've submitted my deck that doesn't have any Aether Drift cards.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's not a ton more to say about Twin, unfortunately. It was kind of fun to play. The couple of times I killed people with the combo, it was interesting. But there was no moment when I was playing this deck where I was like, I am believing in the plan that this deck has in the format right now.
The one thing that I will say, which we didn't touch on too much, the very, very first week of the unbans, I think basically the first list that I saw with Splinter Twin in it was Bamzing, who 5-0'd a league, which was just Boros Energy with Village Bellringer and Splinter Twin. And to be honest with you, if you are a Splinter Twin enjoyer, I would look more towards and like, that's where I would want to spend my resources on. Because I think it's like legitimately a fine plan where it's just you have a good Boros deck and then your bad matchups being unfair decks, you just cheese them out with the twin combo. So I don't even think it's that bad of an idea. It just hasn't been refined that much.
I mean, it's an interesting other place to do. Did they have FOMO in there too? or just
I don't think he had FOMO.
Okay. Because the one thing that's very different now, which we might as well do as like a little end cap here on this discussion, is like the decks that we've seen a lot of Izzet Splinter Twin, and we've seen Teamer Splinter Twin, which we saw in the original era as well. Tarmo Twin was one of the last evolutions of the deck towards the end, right before the card was banned. But there's also these mono red ones. There's Boros Energy, as Devin said. There's Rakdos that is just doing stuff with FOMO combo and Storm Herald, like trying to do, we're going to put things in the graveyard and reanimate these auras onto them, including Eldrazi Conscription and Splinter Twin. I do think that there's like a little bit of space where maybe somebody will figure out some other broken combo, but I feel like maybe what's going on is like pairing it with blue is turning out to be not as powerful as it used to be. And so if there is a shell that's not blue-red X or blue-red twin, maybe that's where you can go. I think for the next couple of weeks, be prepared to play against Tarmogoyf Twin in leagues for a while, though.
Yeah. My parting thought is like, now I understand why this deck had such like undying fans for so long. Like there is a fun element to this deck.
Yeah.
But fun isn't always great. And that's okay too.
I mean, it says a lot about these strange perturbations of the modern format that would cause something that was very good when it was banned to evolve and be not very good when it's taken back off. And we're seeing that a lot with these bans, like Faithless Looting. You know, those decks didn't perform well in Prague. I mean, I do think it's much easier to say these are twin decks than it is to say these are Faithless Looting decks, because that's not even really an archetype in itself. But all of these cards are performing at a less broken level than I think some of us thought they were going to, except for Mox Opal.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's really only one deck. And I don't think, I mean, people definitely thought about, Breach with Opal, but, there was a lot of people who were like Affinity and Hardened Scales and Hammer Time and all this stuff. But it's like, those are just kind of fine,
Yeah.
I don't even remember seeing a looting deck from top 16 or top 32 of any of the RCs. I don't think I saw a single one.
I don't think I did either.
Sad. Definitely didn't see any Splinter Twins.
Yes, and I mean, with the exception of maybe a couple Amulet Titan and Yawgmoth decks, not seeing a lot of Zenith either.
Yeah, I will tell you, that search that I did on Goldfish, where there was only 80 twin decks, and then there was 700 Faithless Looting and 1,000 Mox Opal, really like opened my eyes a lot to sort of what's going on there. Even though it's not a scientific sample, it was like, wow, it's an order of magnitude different from each other.
It's a vibe check.
Yeah, it's a serious vibe check. Well, sorry we couldn't get deeper into defending why Splinter Twin is underplayed or should be given more consideration. It just feels like it's really not the time for it right now. And I guess all the Splinter stands who are out there, we know why they are suddenly quiet. The sickos are quiet because there's not a lot to talk about.
Oh, well. I guess we should wrap up this week's show. It was a good one. We had a long breakdown and then a nice card dive. Just good old-fashioned dive down Magic for you.
That wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and a review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast or reach out, you can. Just tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. Also check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Head over to Have You Play to get some incredible deck and dice boxes and playmats featuring the Equip Mag system. If you use code TheDiveDown2024 for 10% off your first order, that's what you can get. You can give us a little kickback. Also, shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down. Sign up for Mana Traders using the promo code The Dive Down, all one word, and you will get $25 cash back after 3 months of renting Magic Online cards. And you can save money on paper cards if you want to go check out Nerd Rage Gaming with code DIVE8 for 8% off your order. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and tap, copy Deceiver Exarch, Untap, Deceiver Exarch, tap, copy Deceiver Exarch, untap Deceiver Exarch, tap. That's it.
Just don't try to do it on Moto.
Three,
2, 1. Recording.
Shane can do it without a metronome.
That was
You
good.
can do it without a metronome, but you know what? Sometimes you need a click track.
That's true.
I think it happened though. It sounds very off to me, for what it's worth, when that happens. Did it sound normal to you?
I thought it was fine.
It sounded very good to me, and I could hear the metronome, so I was just going to the metronome.
Perfect. That's what we're doing. We're doing metronomes now.